How's it going, you guys? So in this video I'm going to be discussing a topic that a lot of people have asked me to cover since the pandemic started, but I pretty much just avoided giving my opinions on anything related to COVID-19, anything related to the pandemic, and definitely anything relating to vaccination. The primary reason why I've avoided talking about these things is because there's a huge kind of like censoring campaign going on social media and the internet, where anybody who says anything counter to the mainstream gets censored, they get blacklisted, they get shadow banned, etc. And on top of that, obviously, everybody on the pro-vaccination side are heavily invested, emotionally invested, and at the same time, the same thing can be said about everybody who's on the anti-vaccination side. They're all extremely emotionally invested, and it's very rare to find anybody who's actually like evidence-based, as in they've actually been following the science, and they are using the scientific method of asking questions, gathering evidence to answer those questions, and asking more questions. There's no real skeptic of skeptics. There's not a lot of middle ground people, and I would say that's where I fall. I'm not anti-vaccination, I'm not pro-vaccination, but the same thing goes for just COVID-19 in general. There's people who believe COVID-19 is like everything that the government and the news says it is, and then there's people who think that COVID-19 is like fake and it's like covering up all of this Illuminati stuff and microchips and blah blah blah, okay? And for me personally, I don't fall on any side of any of those. I fall on the side of asking the questions about the questions about the questions, and not really like allowing myself to get too invested in any belief system. Like, really, this whole topic is freaking mind-blowing to me, because even people that I respect deeply, that I've had a deep relationship with for like over a decade now, and they're, PhD educated people who you would think would be super objective. Even them, they are into these like really weird, like highly politically charged ideas about the pandemic and everything. Like, anybody who disagrees with me is a low. I don't want to get too deeply in that, but it's just crazy to me. Everyone's just so emotional and so biased towards one side that no one's actually in the middle ground. So, with that being said, if I was to make a video like I'm about to right now, where I actually explain the middle ground, I'm going to have pretty much the majority of my subscriber base, except for the very few that have mastered their emotions, are not psychotic, like schizophrenic, because all sides of this has a lot of schizophrenia. Like 80 to 90% of people are schizoids. And I say schizophrenia as in like their whole reality revolves around whatever bias they believe in. And it's like not actual reality. It's this like crazy image in their head that they are so attached to that they can't see the broader spectrum. And technically, schizophrenia is a diagnosis used to describe out of touch with reality, and these days I realize the vast majority of people are out of touch with whatever we can call objective reality, if you want to even argue that that exists. But anyway, so yeah, lots of reasons why I haven't touched on this, but the only people who would know most of my opinion on all of this are people that have been following me on Instagram. So Coach Wolfgang VL on my Instagram, where every couple months I'll review some interesting evidence that I found that has came out surrounding what might be causing COVID and some of the intervention trials that people have used for different interventions. Like recently we have L-arginine, the amino acid. They did an intervention trial where they put COVID into remission, which is interesting. There was a vitamin D trial back in like November, October of 2020 where they put COVID into remission. And I've kind of posted in-depth science review posts on my Instagram about these topics. but I haven't really made videos about it because of all this crap. So let's begin. So first of all, I'm definitely not pro-vaccination, and my reasoning, I believe, is very rational, unlike most anti-vaxxer. I'm not anti-vaxxer, but most people who are not pro-vax, they have these weird like ideas of like that don't make any sense, and they have all these conspiracy theory things that are reasons for why they don't believe in vaccination. My reason why I'm not pro-vax, I'll explain here in a bit, it has nothing to do with conspiracies and whatnot. But I'm also not anti-vax. So when I say I'm not anti-vax, what I mean is, like, as a personal trainer and a health consultant, pretty much I would say 90% of all my clientele are vaccinated, and they told me before they were getting vaccinated that they're going to get vaccinated. And I never ever once told anybody not to get vaccinated, and I didn't push back against it or anything like that whatsoever. I did, however, say, and generally these people know, maybe not the first shot, but the second shot is going to probably put them out of commission for a couple days. And so part of this is because I don't really have enough evidence to suggest that vaccinations are necessarily harmful for the vast majority of people, but there is evidence of serious side effects in certain groups, which I'll get to here in a bit, and whether the vaccination's even beneficial or prevents infection, prevents the spread, and these types of things is extremely shaky, which again I'll get to in a bit. But I never tell my clients not to get vaccinated. I don't spread fear or anything like that whatsoever. I do joke about it though. I'm like, gonna get microchipped by Billy G Gates or whatever. You're gonna close in your communication, and then after getting vaccinated or whatever, I ask my clients if they've been contacted by Bill Gates yet through microchip. And it's funny because a lot of my clients, they do have PhDs. I have clients that are doctors, counselors, psychologists. I have a professor of data analysis. So I mean, my clients, I've had several nurses that are my clients. So I mean, my clientele is very high ranking on the professional scale. But anyway, so I don't talk them out of it because it just, to me, it's not that alarming. And here's the other thing, is because I don't have a lot of like evidence that you're going to die or something if you get vaccinated. And I myself don't really, I question whether vaccination is even beneficial, just so we're throwing it out there. But I also question how dangerous is the vaccination, if it even is dangerous. And part of the great thing about having such a wide variety of clients is I've had like 12 clients now who actually had COVID, and only like 3 of them actually showed symptoms, and the majority of them, at least 8, were completely asymptomatic. Okay, and of course there's some minor symptoms in some of them, but the vast majority of them were asymptomatic, but they had to be quarantined, and they got tested multiple times, and this and that. So that was the first thing. And a lot of these clients, they were obese already that got COVID, and even though they were asymptomatic, and like 2 of my clients actually were one of my clients was obese, but he wasn't following my diet program or my supplement routine like all the other ones. All the asymptomatic clients that I had were following my supplement routine and nutrition routine by the books. They were supplementing vitamin D, and when they got when they got COVID, they started megadosing vitamin D for the first 7 days, because I informed them about the intervention trial. And they also were supplementing omega-3, one of them pharmaceutical grade, prescribed by his doctor, because there's some evidence that omega-3 index actually is correlated with COVID outcomes. And they were following a mostly ketogenic diet. If not, then maybe some berries on low glycemic load whole foods here and there. But most of them were following a high protein, low carb diet based on saturated and omega-3 marine source fats, supplemented with vitamin D. Most of them were taking magnesium and supplementing vitamin C as well, even though that vitamin C was not something I really emphasized much. And all of my clients who are following my freaking diet and supplement routine that tested positive for COVID, even overweight individuals, some of them were like 100 pounds overweight or more. I had one client who was like 330 pounds or so, and he was following all of my diet and supplement routine for like 6 to 8 weeks at that point. Asymptomatic, completely asymptomatic. Okay? But the ones who were having trouble maintaining my diet, they're YOLO people. YOLO as in you only live once, I might as well eat the burger with the fries and everything. They were the ones who were getting the symptoms. So to me, and they survived, they just felt like they were going to die for like a couple days. One of them, who was overweight, not following my program, when he started supplementing vitamin D, even though it was late into his COVID, that was when his symptoms started to go away, which I found interesting. And so, and he had lasting out-of-breath symptoms that gradually decreased over the weeks. But what I'm getting at here is, from what I can gather, combining the evidence of what makes severe COVID-19 symptoms more likely, and what I've seen in my clients who are actually following that the evidence of, what can I do to protect myself. I have hands-on experience, and I have evidence from intervention trials, and obviously the population data has come out around hospitalizations. Very clear picture of what actually makes you susceptible to severe symptoms of COVID, let alone dying. And by the way, none of my clients at all died of fucking COVID, let alone were put on ventilators or any of that. Even the ones who had severe cases. Actually, one of them, before we were working together, actually was in the hospital and on the ventilator and stuff. But anyway, so with that being said, okay, I personally strongly believe, I know the nutritional factors that make you most susceptible to COVID-19. And I have hands-on experience. I followed the data. I've written several in-depth review posts on my Instagram about some of these things. So I'm pretty confident that regardless of whether you're vaccinated or not, if you're doing these things, okay, your chances of getting severe symptoms like, severe pneumonia or any of these other things that might happen, blood clots, and especially being put on a ventilator or dying from freaking COVID, they're extremely unlikely as long as you're following these things. So already that is, for me, what is the most effective way of preventing being infected by COVID in general, because I think that's what we should be freaking focusing on, is having your omega-3 status adequate, removing all polyunsaturated omega-6 fats from your diet. That includes high-fat chicken products and high-fat pork products, but especially vegetable oils and all these things. Mono and diglycerides, which is hidden trans fat in a lot of products people don't know about now because the FDA banned freaking trans fats but allow them to change the freaking name. Gotta love the FDA. And then making sure your vitamin D levels are adequate. Now, if I remember correctly, if you get your levels tested, adequate vitamin D levels, good enough for preventing COVID symptoms, was calculated to be somewhere between 40 and 80 nanograms per deciliter. Pardon me if I butchered that measurement, but it's been a while since I've actually looked at this. But that was the last thing that I've seen. So 40 and 80 nanograms per deciliter if you actually get your vitamin D levels tested. If not, then just supplementing about 20,000 IUs for 7 to 14 days, followed by a maintenance dose of 5,000 IUs every single day is likely to get you in that ideal range without heavy concerns of toxicity. And then on top of that, there's not a lot of evidence for this, for COVID specifically, but for overall viral infections in general, just because it won't hurt you and it might potentially help you, taking about 1 gram of vitamin C per day, probably a good idea. Most people notice they feel, they have an anti-stress effect. They didn't really feel just an increased sense of well-being and better mood and energy when they supplement vitamin C. So you might as well just take it as plain old ascorbic acid. There's zero reasons to take anything, special forms of vitamin C. And then on top of that, just lowering your glycemic load to the highest extent possible. If you want to just follow a zero-carb carnivore diet, that's one way. If you want to do like a ketogenic diet that includes, lots of plant foods and low glycemic load berries, that's a great option. If you want to follow like a low carbohydrate paleo diet, that's a good option, or just a paleo diet in general, as long as you don't overdo it on the bananas, and if your style of paleo isn't heavy on starches and tubers, and especially just removing like the anything fast absorbing, glycemic inducing carbohydrate, whatever, maple syrup and all that nonsense. Some people on paleo and honey, probably not a good idea, even though I've kind of been on a honey phase the past year or so. So the point is, lower the glycemic load of your diet, emphasize protein, and if you're overweight or you have type 2 diabetes, you're in the highest risk of freaking, severe COVID outcomes. So you need to really drop get your hemoglobin A1C into the healthy range. I would say that's around a hemoglobin A1C of 4 is what you should probably aim for if you're in the diabetic range, at least under 5. Because 5 anything under 6, I think, is considered the reference range. But it's been, it depends on who you go to. Anyway, get your freaking health on check. Okay? So the reason why this is so important is because, so here's the other thing. If you get vaccination is the benefits of vaccination is heavily dependent on your metabolic health. Okay, so this was actually listed on the CDC's website for a while. The CDC actually had a section on their website where they said, look, if you have type 2 diabetes or obesity, your immune response to vaccination is heavily suppressed, it's heavily weakened. So basically, the effectiveness of vaccination is dependent on the degree of your metabolic health, the degree of your insulin sensitivity. And last we checked, my little brother actually had to double check this for me because we're in the middle of a debate, I guess, or a discussion around all this. Because I was convinced that the CDC was just evil, but why don't they talk about this? Because I don't study the CDC's website. I study the science behind health outcomes and these diseases, and then obviously the interventions and medications and things that are used to treat the disease or prevent it or whatever. So I was aware of the science behind insulin sensitivity being a primary factor in your immune response to vaccination, in particular influenza. And my little brother actually found, and this is November, I believe, of 2020, the CDC listed that on their website. So even the CDC has said that basically vaccinations are not really as effective if you're freaking overweight, obese, or diabetic. So, and I don't know if they still have that section on their website because I don't pay attention, but it wouldn't surprise me if they removed it because they changed their definition of herd immunity. They used to say anybody who is either, vaccinated or has been exposed, has been infected with the virus previously is considered, part of herd immunity. That's what herd immunity is. But now they changed it to when a population of people is that fully vaccinated, that's when you establish herd immunity, which is just ridiculous. Because we know that even though they'll claim otherwise, natural immunity actually provides a more robust immune response than vaccination. This has been, I've had nurses even establish this for me. This has been a known fact in immunology for decades now, but of course everything's changing for some reason. Anyway, national immunity should be part of herd immunity. Anyway, CDC said explicitly, and science, without a shadow of a doubt, has said explicitly, if you're obese or insulin, or you have insulin resistance, your benefits of vaccination are extremely lessened. So the more metabolically healthy you are, the more effective vaccinations are going to be for you. Okay? That's very important. Okay? Because people think, oh, I'm sure I'm fat. No, I'm overweight and I freaking eat, my freaking double cheeseburgers with the bun, with the deep fried potatoes, the freaking french fries deep fried in highly oxidized omega-6 polyunsaturated vegetable oils, and drinking my super extra large soda every day. I can just get a freaking vaccination and I'll be good to go. I'm protected. And actually, the science does not support that, but you won't hear this crap in the media. The media's like, oh, no, just get vaccinated, you're good to go. And the thing is, this is not even funny. This is actually just fucked up. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the only justification that I heard for this as rational is that, oh, you can get the majority of the population to take a pill or get a shot, but you cannot convince them to eat actual real food and stay away from toxic, abusive foods that are actually the root cause of what's killing them, even in this case. It's weakening their immune system and making them susceptible to COVID-19. It's like, okay, too bad the vaccination isn't really that effective if your immune health is compromised. So if you understand the kind of the picture I'm painting here, my main, I'm not really too high on vaccinations. I'm high on getting your body healthy enough to fight off the infection to begin with. So here is kind of like the icing on the cake, okay? So freaking vaccinations are not really even that effective for obese and diabetic people. And that's kind of my own overgeneralization and exaggeration of the evidence. But you get my point already. And the crazy thing is, over 85% of the people who are actually hospitalized with severe COVID outcomes are obese, type 2 diabetic. They have symptoms of metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is simply the result of high glycemic load carbohydrates eaten in a caloric excess, along with high amounts of polyunsaturated omega-6 fats. That is the main driver of obesity, of high blood pressure, of type 2 diabetes. Essentially, insulin resistance is a main cause, the main mechanism that's causing all of these things. Your body's ability to tolerate glucose, typically, that's driving the majority of these problems, okay? And then, of course, there's people with they smoke a lot, so their lungs are not healthy, although that's another rabbit hole we can get down as to how diet can protect you from cigarette smoke. But it all has to do with free radical damage that's taking up glutathione and taking up superoxide dismutase. And then obviously when you have a lot of body fat on you, your body produces more inflammatory cytokines, just literally because you have a lot of excess body fat. And then these foods are producing more oxidative damage directly, whether you're overweight or not. And when you're overweight, just as a result of having that excess adipose tissue, those are all creating more free radical damage. Like, it's literally overwhelming your body's NRF2 pathways, what they call detoxification pathways. Okay, NRF2, glutathione, and superoxide dismutase to overwhelmed. So your body can't fight off the viruses because you have all of these different sources of oxidative damage. That's literally the mechanism behind most diseases. Okay? So you got that double whammy of eating foods that create more burden on your immune system and the excess adipose tissue that's contributing to it, which makes you extremely susceptible to dying of all these various symptoms of COVID, whether it's blood clot, whether it's severe pneumonia, secondary infections, just So let's see, where was I going with this? So the point is, the vast majority of people that are dying of COVID, whether they're vaccinated or not, are overweight, they have metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetic, etc. The vast majority of people that are and if you get vaccinated and you're in the highest severity group, okay, vaccination doesn't work for those people very well. It's like the very people that need to get vaccinated, that are most susceptible to severe symptoms, are the very ones that vaccinations hardly even work for anyway. So to me, I don't really see vaccinations as the answer, because the effect of vaccinations are dependent on, how healthy you are. It's kind of interesting how it's like, okay, to me, I don't see vaccinations as the solution, or whether you're vaccinated or not, as like a causation factor. I see, are you freaking overweight? Are you diabetic? Do you have metabolic syndrome? Do you have insulin resistance? Because if you do, vaccinations aren't going to save you. Either way, you are at the highest risk of dying, okay? So it's like, we're focusing on vaccinations and all this stuff. We should really be focusing on making people healthy. That's like the main thing. It doesn't make, even if, whether you believe in vaccination or not, to me that's not the main topic of concern that we should be focusing on. You should still be focusing on being healthy, otherwise you're still fucked. That is my main thing here. That's why I'm not for vaccinations. I'm not against them, because I don't feel like they matter that much, okay? Now that's going to get a lot of heat. So, now to take it further, and this is really being more specific about vaccinations. Unfortunately, most people aren't even going to watch the video this far. Here's the evidence of vaccinations that I've come to. So, let's see. So, at first, when vaccinations were really rolling out, okay, what we found in America at least was 9 out of 10 people hospitalized with severe COVID were unvaccinated. That's what we found at first, okay, so at first it was like April and May, I believe, when I was really paying attention to this, and the news outlets were really pumping this out. 9 out of 10 patients hospitalized with severe COVID outcomes, 9 out of 10 people dying with COVID were unvaccinated, okay? But the problem with that is that vaccinations weren't as readily deployed at that point. Like, they weren't as readily available, or the amount of people vaccinated in the population were a smaller chunk compared to the unvaccinated. And one of my clients who has a PhD in data analysis, and she's one of those people that actually authors meta-analysis and population studies, she is vaccinated, fully vaxxed and pro-vax, and her father is a doctor, by the way. But she pointed out to me that right now you can't really those studies are not really that beneficial, because what she was telling me is the sample size of patients that are vaccinated is so much smaller as a whole population compared to the amount of people who are unvaccinated. And what she's saying is, the more people that get vaccinated in the population, the more people that are vaccinated will likely see that are hospitalized. So what she's basically saying is, the reason why we're not seeing a lot of people that are vaccinated who are hospitalized in these studies is because there's just not a lot of total people in the population that are vaccinated. So only people who actually read science and understand how to interpret population data would understand this. But basically, there's a small percentage of people who are vaccinated in the population at the time compared to the unvaccinated. There's just so much more people who are unvaccinated. So as a result, you'll see just a whole lot more unvaccinated people in the hospital with COVID, because that's the majority of people in general. Now, she told me that at first, before we had this data that she was saying we're going to see eventually. And she's pro-vax. And she was fully vaxxed, but she has a PhD in this. So, interestingly enough, I believe it was in July or August, I was starting to see populations that had the majority of their citizens vaccinated. And I don't remember exactly which populations this was at this point. So bear with me here. I believe it might have been Finland. Don't crucify me. I might be misspeaking. I believe it was Finland. But it was a couple of populations that the majority were vaccinated. And what you found is in these populations, anywhere from like 40 to 60% of the population that were vaxxed actually made up the amount of people who were vaccinated. So you saw, maybe you could say, half and half, vax versus unvaxxed in those hospitals when more people were vaccinated in that population. So basically what you see is the more citizens are vaccinated in a population, the more vaccinated people you see in the hospital, as a result of just the more people in general as a percentage of the population being vaccinated. And so that shows you that, it's not true anymore that like 9 out of 10 people that are hospitalized with COVID are vaccinated or unvaccinated. That's not true anymore. So, and again, you will find certain populations where most of the people in the hospital are unvaccinated or something like that. It just depends on the population we're looking at. And this is just talking about percentage of the population that's vaccinated versus unvaccinated. That's the confounding variable there that influences the outcomes. But I would say you can even go as far as to see, well, in that population, how many are, what's the rates of obesity? What's the rates of type 2 diabetes in that population? Because that's going to influence health outcomes. But they don't look at these freaking things. They're just like, this amount of people are vaccinated in the hospitals versus unvaccinated. Therefore, vaccinations are great. And it's like, yeah, I understand that that's how correlative studies work. That's how cohort studies work. That's how population data works. It's all correlation and not causation. There's always going to be confounding variables, even when you're confined to a freaking metabolic ward. But it's not clear as far as just looking at hospitalizations and the rates of vax versus unvax. It's not clear. Beyond that, we have what was the other thing I was going to bring up? Let's see. Damn it. Okay, this is just so much information I'm getting into one video. But, oh yeah, that's right. And also, so once they saw this, and then they also saw that now we have evidence in certain populations that suggests even if you're vaccinated, you can still spread the virus. You can still get infected even if you're vaccinated. The incidences of people getting infected with COVID and having severe outcomes, whether they're even when they are vaccinated, has been increasing the more people are getting vaccinated. So we're starting to see that getting vaccinated doesn't really guarantee that you can't spread it. Viral shedding still happens. You still spread the virus within the first week or two of getting vaccinated. And there's quite a bit of people now who are getting COVID, and there's still hospitalizations of vaccinated people. Quite a bit, and depending on the population looked at, whether you're freaking vaccinated or not. So it's like, okay. So we know that obesity, type 2 diabetes, and insulin resistance, these things are the main things that are driving it. These are the majority of people that are getting severe outcomes. And also, your immune response to the vaccination depends on your metabolic health. And we're starting to see that even if you are vaccinated, you can still end up in the freaking hospital. So it's like, you can get vaccinated and shit, but the main thing here is not whether you're vaccinated or not. That's not really to me, it's you have way more of a chance of preventing the getting COVID and all this and getting severe outcomes if you have these other things I mentioned earlier in the video taken care of. And again, that's why it's like, if you get vaccinated, maybe it'll help. The main benefit now that they're saying is, if you get vaccinated, you can still get infected, but you have less of a chance of severe outcomes. It's supposed to help protect you against severe health outcomes, negative health outcomes of COVID now. That's what they say now. So it's not for prevention, it's not for preventing the spread or any of that, it's just to help you fight it off if you do manage to get it. But it's like, guess what else will help you fight it off? If you have all these other markers checked that seem to be verified as even more potent. Vitamin D seems to put COVID into remission, and now they're claiming arginine does, but yeah, it's kind of like an interesting thing. So, yeah, it's like, I don't know. So there's that, okay? And to me, that's like the main thing. Now, let's talk about the main things we're seeing with like any reason why maybe you should be skeptical about getting COVID or getting the vaccination, okay? So again, I don't know about dying if you get the freaking vaccination. None of my clients, and most of my clients are vaccinated, none of my clients so far have shown any severe side effects yet. Some of them seem to maybe get low-grade colds or something. But none of them seem to get anything significant that I'm aware of yet, okay? And it's been months, actually it's been quite a few months. Most of my clients started getting vaccinated around April or so. So, some of them were required to get vaccinated for their job. And I haven't really seen any severe, side effects in these people, okay? And again, it kind of reinforces why I'm not just don't get vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. Because I'm not an extremist. At least I don't think I am. I think everyone else on all sides of this are extremists, in my opinion. Let's see. And it's crazy how many people are just not looking at this kind of like I am. But anyway, what do I know, right? What was I going to say? Now, the thing is, there actually was a pretty large amount of people, of men. There's a large amount of men, I think it was in the age group of 12 to 30 years of age, who got vaccinated and they had, myocarditis, basically inflammation of the heart, it's like an inflammatory heart condition, okay? And there's two different types of inflammation of the heart. There's enlarged heart due to a lot high cardiovascular fitness. You'll get an enlarged heart. And then there's a pathological inflammation of the heart that can cause a wide variety of negative consequences, including sudden death. And supposedly, the vast majority of people who get the inflammatory heart condition, and it's been verified as a side effect of a particular disease, a particular vaccination. I don't remember which one. I think it might have been the Johnson & Johnson, but I don't remember. But there was over 5,000 people as of June, 5,000 people in that age group of men who developed inflammatory heart condition as a result of vaccination, and the majority of them recovered. But thing is, number one, that was quite a long time ago, and every time I looked at the statistics, it seemed to have been increasing. Second thing is, when you tell a physician that you have a side effect of a vaccination, it's very common to get ridiculed, and they're like, oh, there's no way it could have been vaccination. How do you know that wasn't something else, How do you know it was from vaccination? That's just silly. And a lot of them are like, oh, the vaccinations have been proven safe by the FDA. There's no way that can be caused by the vaccination. How is that even mechanistically plausible? Says a person who probably hasn't even read the evidence. But anyway, that's a stupid statement on my part. Point is, how many people are developing these side effects that are getting swept under the rug? The vast majority of citizens in our society won't even be able to recognize a delayed side effect of vaccination, because most don't even recognize when they're suffering from side effects or negative illnesses that are directly caused or contributed to by pharmaceuticals. How many people, like I had a kind of like a weird discussion with a PhD educated person recently who was like, yeah, like, don't you think millions of people being vaccinated, they would be dropping dead by now if the vaccination was harmful, or they'd be having these significant side effects and we'd know about it by now? And my response to that is antibiotics, for example. You can go through a hardcore round of antibiotics and not see food allergies or severe, increased susceptibility to allergens in the air, like pollen and stuff. But food allergies is a big side effect of antibiotics, and also mood imbalances and anxiety, and even things like psoriasis, like I had, and irritable bowel syndrome. But you don't see those symptoms till like a year after taking antibiotics. And that happened to me back in 2012. It took a whole freaking year for me to see all these symptoms manifest as a result of heavy rounds of antibiotics. And for a long time, I was like, there's no way in hell these antibiotics could have caused such a, significant change in my health, And the more that I experimented and studied and stuff, eventually I realized, holy crap, I literally killed off all the gut bacteria in my intestine, and it caused me to not be able to digest whole grains, and I developed a milk allergy to the protein, not lactose, to where my whole respiratory system just seizes up if I drink dairy proteins, which really sucks. And I can't eat beans, nuts and seeds, and legumes, which is the main foods your doctors will tell you that you need to eat. And it's because I don't have the gut bacteria anymore to digest it, and nothing helped. I tried everything, and it took a whole year for those symptoms to manifest. And that's pretty common. You'll see that with a lot of different medications. So, it's like, do you really think that the population is even going to see, like, oh shit, like, 3 months later, I have neuropathy now, from the vaccination supposedly, or I have inflammation in my heart a couple weeks later. But it's been like a whole month since I got vaccinated. There's no way it could have been the vaccination. But, there's so many weird downstream things that can happen from these interventions, okay, that haven't been shown, that haven't been talked about in the mainstream, for example. And doctors won't be aware of it because they don't read the studies outside of the mainstream, okay, or what they read in Prevention magazine or something. So again, it's not a matter of, oh yeah, vaccines cause these issues. It's a matter of, bro, there could be unforeseen side effects of these vaccines. Maybe it's in a very small percent of the population, but it's possible nonetheless. There's some that have been documented, and we just don't know. So it's like you're taking a gamble either way. Are you going to die from COVID, or are you going to die from the small chance of getting side effects of the vaccine? And for me, when you look at the things I mentioned earlier in this video that make vaccinations more effective and really eliminate a large percentage of you getting side effects from COVID anyway, it's like, does it really make sense to put myself at that small risk of getting the symptoms from the vaccination? And it's like, the problem here is the vast majority of people believe they're going to die if they don't get vaccinated. Even if you have a PhD, and most of these people that have PhD level education, even my client who's like a data analysis, and she's awesome. I love talking to her because she's not dogmatic or an extremist, but the majority of these people haven't actually read these studies, and especially haven't read the studies on metabolic health and what contributes towards dying of severe symptoms of COVID and all these things. Some of them, like I had, again, a PhD level person in this field who was trying to tell me if you don't get vaccinated, it's because you voted for Donald Trump, which I was like, what the fuck? Like completely ignoring any rational explanation for it, or you know, and it's like, oh, you're a freaking Trumpster. Like, oh my, it's Trump's fault. Like, wow. Literally nothing I said in this had anything to do with politics or anything like that, or even conspiracy theories for that matter. So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'll make another video where I go in depth on the mechanisms behind COVID-19 and why I believe so strongly that these particular dietary factors that I mentioned earlier, vitamin D status, etc., are probably your most like effective bet towards preventing COVID and all these other things. I don't really have enough time. I gotta start training my clients here in like 20 minutes. I gotta actually leave my house in 10. And this video is already a long ass time. And if you watch this whole video, please post in the comments that you watched this whole video, because I'm probably gonna get fucking banned from freaking YouTube for this, and I haven't even said anything crazy or bad. But I really want to know, is there anyone out there who's thinking rationally about all this? Is there anyone out there who's not extremist on one side? Like, oh, like I'm gonna get microchipped. Oh my god, it's all like a freaking conspiracy. Or like, oh no, you're an anti-vaxxer. Screw you. It's like, am I really an anti-vaxxer? I don't know. It's like, again, I'm saying like, bro, like, you know, you might have an increased immunity to vaccine if you get vaccinated, but your immunity is gonna, your likelihood of like preventing COVID and all that and fighting it off is gonna be way better if you just focus on the nutrition, whether you get vaccinated or not, even if you did get vaccinated. So yeah, it's like it seems more like a nutrition thing. Like, oh, vaccinations are not even effective unless you have the nutrition on check. So it's like, maybe it's the nutrition and the metabolic health that is making it seem, I don't know. And also, it's very clear that there's a lot of things about vaccination, the benefits of vaccination, that I might just not be aware of. So, yeah, I mean, I might be ignorant, right? But let me know in the comments. Hopefully this has made some sense. I'll talk to y'all next time.